This is a quick look at life in the provinces in the Roman Empire. A lot of this covers the Republican era as well as the Imperial era. It's very quick because for our purposes the key information is reasonably simple. The Romans did make some attempts to Romanize in the provinces in the sense that all their law courts used Latin and their armed forces used Latin. So at the very least, if a local population wanted to engage with the Romans on the legal or military level, they had to have an awareness of Latin. But it wasn't quite this imposition of a foreign language at all. Those provincials, those people in the provinces who engaged with the occupying Romans well and served them well could be rewarded with Roman citizenship. And that is a big deal because it allowed them to serve in the army, it allowed them to stand for political office, and it exempted them from a lot of direct taxation. This is a big deal. It's a major incentive for people in the provinces to engage and to help the occupying forces. Obviously, that's not going to be something that all of the provincials engaged with, but it's a big carrot to dangle in front of them. The Romans allowed native languages in the east of the empire, especially where Greek was enormously widely used. The Romans used Latin and Greek almost equally. They allowed Greek to remain the lingua franca of the eastern provinces. And they didn't enforce the use of Latin outside the law and the military. Local traditions and customs were allowed to coexist with the traditions of the occupying Romans. The main exemption came from Druidism, where human sacrifice was still part of that religion or cultural movement. I think maybe it's closer to religion, I'm not sure. So as long as it remained humane, the Romans allowed local populations to observe the traditions and customs that they wanted to. However, obviously there were some provinces who became very unhappy with Roman occupation. The biggest imposition, the biggest complaint that people would have about the occupying Romans was the imposition of taxes which the Romans themselves might not have to pay. Now, the taxation was one thing, but the collection of taxes, which we look at in a different presentation, was largely done by private companies, essentially. Private individuals would set up to collect taxes. These people were called the publicani, or publicans. Those of you who remember The Merchant of Venice will know that when Shylock first meets Antonio, he says, "How like a fawning publican he looks, how like a tax collector he looks." Anyway, you've got me off the topic. But these tax collectors would employ violence, intimidation, and they were really, really thuggish people engaging with the populations of the provinces. So it's easy to understand why the local population would resent so intensely Roman taxation and Roman tax harvesting. Anyway, here's the skinny. Please pause this now to make sure you have that. As usual, if you add more notes, it's going to be better for you in the long term. And if you have any questions, then just ask me in class.